Sophia Reynolds pressed send on that photo with a smile on her face. Not by accident, not out of guilt. She chose that moment, that angle, that sunset, and she sent it to me, Olivia Carter, her supposed best friend of 15 years, because she wanted me to see exactly what she and my husband had become. She wanted me to break. She wanted me to fall apart so completely that there would be nothing left of me to fight back. She had no idea that sending that photo was the single biggest mistake of her life. Before we go any further, if this is your first time finding this channel, please subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story like this one. Drop a comment right now and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let us get into it, because what happened next is something I promise you have never heard before. The night Olivia Carter's life split into two halves, the life she thought she had, and the truth she had been living inside without knowing it, started quietly. It started the way most devastating evenings do, with nothing unusual at all. She was sitting at the small oak desk in the corner of their home office, the one Daniel had picked out 3 years ago, during a weekend they spent driving through antique markets in Tacoma. She remembered that day clearly, because he had been so proud of finding it, carrying it to the car himself, even though it weighed more than he expected, laughing with sweat on his forehead, saying, "This is going to be the desk where you write your masterpiece, Olivia." She had laughed with him. She had believed him. She had loved him so much in that moment that her chest actually hurt with it. Now she sat at that same desk, finishing a cybersecurity compliance report for a financial firm in Portland, a cup of tea going cold beside her laptop, the city of Seattle humming softly beyond the window glass. It was a Tuesday. It was 9:47 in the evening. Daniel had texted 3 hours earlier to say he was working late again and would grab food on the way home. She had replied with a simple okay and a small heart emoji, the way she always did, because she trusted him, because that is what you do after 8 years of marriage. You trust without questioning, you love without interrogating, you believe in the version of a person you chose to spend your life beside. Her phone lit up on the desk. She glanced at it without urgency. The notification showed Sophia's name, and underneath it a small image preview. Olivia assumed it was the picture Sophia had mentioned earlier that week, something from a girls' trip she was supposedly planning for the two of them, a surprise destination she had been teasing about for days. Sophia was always doing things like that. Thoughtful gestures wrapped in mystery little gifts that reminded Olivia why she had kept this woman close since they were both 20 years old, navigating early careers and bad apartments and worse heartbreaks together. She picked up the phone. She opened the message. The image loaded. And for a moment, just one raw, unguarded moment, Olivia's mind genuinely did not understand what it was seeing. Daniel stood on a beach at sunset, his jacket gone, his sleeves rolled up the way he only did when he was completely relaxed, completely comfortable, completely himself. And Sophia was pressed against him with both arms around his neck, their faces turned toward each other, their mouths meeting in a kiss that was not a peck, not a greeting, not anything that could be explained or softened or reframed into something innocent. The light behind them was golden and perfect. The kind of light that photographers spend hours waiting for. The kind of light that only existed in moments of joy, of intimacy, of a love that believed it was private. Someone had taken that photo carefully. Someone had staged that moment. And then Sophia had sent it to her. Olivia sat very still. She did not drop the phone. She did not stand up. She did not make a sound. She just looked at the image, and something inside her chest performed a slow, silent collapse, the way a building implodes when all its internal supports are removed at once, everything falling inward, perfectly controlled from the outside, catastrophic within. 8 years of Sunday mornings. 8 years of arguments about whose turn it was to do laundry and whose parents they were visiting at Christmas. 8 years of inside jokes, of finishing each other's sentences, of knowing exactly what to order for the other person at every restaurant they had ever been to. All of it sitting there in that single image, rearranged into a shape she did not recognize. She kept staring. And then something strange happened. Something she could not fully explain then and only understood much later. She smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a woman who had just been handed the one piece of information that suddenly made everything else make sense. The missed calls, the late nights, the way Sophia had started calling more in the last 6 months, always asking about Daniel, always inserting herself into conversations about their plans, their finances, their future. The way Daniel had started going to the gym at hours that did not match any gym's busiest schedule. The way he had started locking his phone face down on every surface he set it on. She had noticed all of it. She had explained all of it away. She was done explaining things away. She typed her response slowly and deliberately. "Thank you for sending this. It actually makes everything easier." She read it twice, then she sent it. Then she opened her Instagram account, selected the photo Sophia had sent her, and posted it publicly with a caption that was 6 words long. "Congratulations to the happy couple." She tagged both of them. She set the phone face down on the oak desk. Then she went back to her compliance report and finished the last 4 paragraphs with perfect, uninterrupted focus. By the time she closed her laptop, it was 11:15. She washed her face, changed into the oversized university t-shirt she slept in, and got into bed. She lay in the dark, listening to the ordinary sounds of the city outside, and she made herself breathe slowly, evenly, deliberately. In through the nose, out through the mouth. She did not cry. Not yet. Not tonight. Tonight, she needed to think. When Daniel came home at 11:42, she heard the front door. She heard him pause in the entryway. She heard the sound of him fumbling with his phone. She heard him say very quietly, "Oh no, oh no, no, no." She kept her eyes closed. He came into the bedroom slowly. She could feel him standing over her in the dark, watching her breathe. "Olivia." His voice was careful, controlled. "Are you awake?" She said nothing. He stood there for another long moment, and then he walked quietly back out and pulled the door most of the way shut. She heard him on the phone in the hallway, his voice dropping to a murmur, and even though she could not make out every word she heard, Sophia's name twice. She lay there with her hands flat on the mattress beside her and let the information settle into her bones. By midnight, her phone had accumulated 47 notifications. By 1 in the morning, it was over 100. She could feel it buzzing intermittently on the nightstand, a persistent pulse like a heartbeat that did not belong to her body. She did not pick it up. She lay in the dark, and she thought very carefully about everything she now needed to do. By 2 in the morning, Daniel was in the guest room. She knew because she heard him walk past their door, heard the soft click of the guest room door closing, heard the silence that followed. She wondered if he had tried to sleep, or if he had stayed on his phone trying to manage the damage, trying to figure out what story the two of them could still construct from the wreckage of the one they had already told. She wondered for the first time how long it had actually been going on. She thought about 6 months. She thought about a year. She thought about a dinner party last spring when Sophia had laughed a little too loudly at a joke Daniel made, and how he had looked across the table with a particular expression, quick and private, and immediately smoothed over, and how Olivia had noticed it and told herself she was being paranoid. Told herself she was someone who searched for problems in moments of happiness because some old wounded part of her could not believe good things were real. She had apologized to herself for her suspicion. She would not be doing that again. At 6 in the morning, she got up before her alarm. She showered. She put on the dark green blazer that always made her feel like she was someone who could not be touched by ordinary disasters. She made coffee. She sat at the kitchen table. When Daniel appeared at 6:40, freshly showered and visibly terrified, she was on her second cup. He stopped in the kitchen doorway. He looked at her for a long moment. "Olivia," he said, "we need to talk." She looked up at him over the rim of her mug. She said nothing. He came into the kitchen, slowly pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. He put both hands flat on the table. He was doing the thing he always did when he was nervous, pressing his palms down hard, as if bracing himself against a surface, as if that could stop the floor from shifting. "What you posted last night," he said. "You have to take it down. My parents are calling me. My sister is calling me. This is Olivia. This is not the way to handle something like this." She took a slow sip of her coffee. "Handle it," she repeated. "This is a private matter. Whatever you think you saw." "Whatever I think I saw," she said. Something in her voice made him stop. He looked at her very carefully, and she watched him recalibrate in real time, watched him decide that the panicked apology approach was not going to work with the woman sitting across from him right now, because the woman sitting across from him right now was not panicking. "Okay," he said, exhaling. "Okay, I know what it looked like. I know what it was, and I am Olivia. I am so sorry. You have to believe that I never wanted you to find out this way." "What way did you want me to find out?" she asked. He opened his mouth. He closed it. "How long?" she said. He looked at the table. Daniel, how long? 7 months, he said very quietly. The number landed in the space between them like something dropped from a height. 7 months. Winter into spring into summer. All those mornings she had made coffee for two. All those evenings she had asked him about his day and listened to his answers and believed what he told her. All those times Sophia had called or texted or shown up at their door, and Olivia had felt grateful, genuinely, warmly, embarrassingly grateful, that she had a friend that committed to maintaining a relationship. "Did you meet her at the company, or was this happening before she started working there?" Olivia asked. He looked up sharply. "How did you know she—" "Answer the question." "She transferred to our division 8 months ago," he said. "But it wasn't something that was planned. Things don't just happen for 7 months," Olivia said. "That's not how 7 months works." He had nothing to say to that. She finished her coffee. She stood up. She rinsed her mug in the sink with the same focused efficiency she brought to everything, and she set it upside down on the drying rack. "I have a meeting at 8, she said. "When I come home tonight, I would like you to have a bag packed. You can stay at a hotel, or you can go to your mother's, or you can go wherever it is you have been telling me you were while you were actually somewhere else. I don't care which one you choose." "Olivia, I am not asking," she said. "I am informing you." She picked up her laptop bag and her keys. "And Daniel," she said from the doorway without turning around, "whatever you and Sophia are planning to say about me, whatever story you've already started building, I need you to understand that I have been a cybersecurity specialist for 11 years. I know how digital trails work. I know how to follow them. I know where people leave evidence when they think they are being careful." She paused. "I have barely started looking." Then she walked out. The morning air hit her face, and she stood on the front step for exactly 4 seconds. 4 seconds where the smile she had worn all night finally cracked at its edges, where the grief tried to surface, where the version of herself that had loved Daniel Brooks without reservation for 8 years tried to scream. She breathed in. She breathed out. She walked to her car. Her phone was ringing before she reached it. Sophia's name on the screen calling for what the notification told her was the 7th time since midnight. Olivia let it ring. She drove to work. The offices of the technology consulting firm where Olivia had spent the last 6 years occupied 2 floors of a glass building in downtown Seattle. She had built her reputation here from nothing, a junior analyst who stayed 3 hours late every night for the first 2 years, who memorized every system, every protocol, every vulnerability that her clients did not know they had. She had earned every title on her business card through work that no one could have done for her. She nodded at the security desk. She took the elevator to the 9th floor. She set her bag down at her desk. Her colleague Marcus appeared at her door within 4 minutes, which told her that word had already reached the office. Marcus Wren was 41, brilliant, loyal, and constitutionally incapable of pretending not to know something he already knew. "I saw the Instagram post last night," he said. "Good morning, Marcus." "Are you okay?" She looked at him steadily. "I will be." "Do you need anything time off? Do you want me to tell Patricia that I need you to pull the audit logs from the Hargrove contract," she said. "The ones from January through March. I want to look at the submission timestamps against the internal calendar." He stared at her. "Right now." "When you get a chance," she said. "It's not urgent." He lingered in the doorway. "Olivia, what happened?" "Marcus," she said gently, "I appreciate it. I genuinely do. But right now the most helpful thing anyone can do for me is let me work." He nodded. He left. She opened her laptop. She had 8 hours before she needed to go home and face whatever Daniel had decided to do. 8 hours in a place where she understood every system, every rule, every way that things functioned. 8 hours where she was not a betrayed wife or a humiliated woman or a cautionary tale her coworkers would whisper about in the break room. 8 hours where she was exactly who she had always been. She had barely opened her first file when her desk phone rang. She glanced at the display. Internal number. She answered. "Olivia Carter." "It's Patricia," her manager, voice careful in a way that immediately told Olivia the call was not about work. "I wanted to check in. I understand there may be some personal matters that have come up." "I'm fine," Olivia said. "I'm at my desk." Of course you are." A pause. "I only ask because Mr. Brooks called our HR director this morning." Olivia's hand tightened slightly on the receiver. "He called HR." He expressed some concerns about professional overlap, about certain projects, and Patricia seemed to choose her next words very carefully. He raised some questions about the authorship of some shared work from the past year. The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds. "I see," Olivia said. "I want you to know that nothing has been decided. We take these things seriously, and we follow a process." "Of course you do," Olivia said. "Patricia, can I ask you something directly?" "Certainly." "Did he specify which projects?" Another careful pause. "The Meridian Architecture Project. He suggested that some of the core design elements were collaborative in origin and that the attribution in the final report may not have fully reflected." "The Meridian Architecture Project," Olivia said, "was designed by me, presented by me, defended by me, to a room of 12 engineers and 2 senior partners over the course of a 4-hour technical review in February. Daniel was in that room. He did not present. He did not defend. He answered one question and got it partially wrong, and I corrected him in front of everyone." Silence. "I have documentation," Olivia said. "I have timestamps, draft histories, design notes, and email threads going back 14 months that show every stage of that project's development. I can have it to you by 3 o'clock this afternoon." "That's yes," Patricia said. "That would be very helpful." "Wonderful," Olivia said. "Is there anything else?" "No, I think no. Thank you, Olivia." She hung up. She sat very still for a moment. Then she opened a new folder on her desktop and labeled it with the date. So that was how this was going to go. That was the play. While she was processing the personal devastation, while any ordinary person would have been burning with grief and rage and heartbreak, Daniel had gotten up this morning, made one careful, calculated phone call, and tried to strip away the one thing she had built entirely by herself. Not just her marriage, not just her trust, her work, her name, her professional identity. She thought about the desk in the home office, the one he had carried to the car with sweat on his forehead, laughing, saying it would be the desk where she wrote her masterpiece. She thought about what kind of man chooses to do that. She opened her project archive. She had everything, every draft, every version, every late night, every early morning, every moment of exhaustion and doubt and eventual breakthrough that had produced the work Daniel had tried to put his name on this morning. She had it all, and she was about to remember very clearly exactly how good she was at her job. By noon, she had assembled a documentation package that told the complete story of the Meridian project from its first concept sketch to its final submission. Timestamps that could not be altered. Email threads that showed Daniel receiving updates rather than contributing to them. Calendar entries that placed her alone in the office at midnight on 3 consecutive Thursdays. While Daniel had been, she now understood, somewhere else entirely. She sent the package to Patricia at 2:58. At 4 o'clock, Marcus appeared in her office doorway again. He was holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing the expression of a man who had just heard something significant. "HR called Daniel in at 3:30, he said. She accepted one of the coffee cups. "Did they?" The senior partner's assistant was in the hallway. She said the meeting lasted 45 minutes. He sat in the chair across from her desk. "Olivia, what is going on? What is he trying to do?" She looked at Marcus for a long moment. He was a good person. She had worked beside him for 6 years and had never had a reason to question his loyalty. "He thought that if he started the narrative first, he could shape it," she said. "He thought that if he raised questions about my work before I had a chance to respond, I would be too busy defending myself to focus on everything else." Marcus shook his head slowly. "That's calculated," she said. "Yes." "And Sophia?" he asked carefully. Olivia picked up her coffee. "What about her?" "I know she works over at Harrington Tech now. Same building as Daniel's firm. I know they've been working on the Meridian expansion contract together, the one your company handed off last quarter." He paused. "I wasn't sure whether to say anything. I thought maybe you already knew." She looked at him. She had not known. The Meridian expansion, her project, her framework, her design, handed off to a sister firm after the initial completion, a standard arrangement, nothing unusual, nothing she had questioned. She had not questioned it because she trusted the people around her to handle it with integrity. She set the coffee cup down. Tell me what you know, she said. Marcus leaned forward. I only know what I overheard in the parking garage 2 weeks ago. Daniel and someone from Harrington were talking. They didn't see me. I heard him say, and I am telling you his exact words here, once she's out of the picture, we can restructure the attribution on the original documentation. No one's going to dig through a project that closed 8 months ago. The room was very quiet. Out of the picture, Olivia said. I should have told you sooner, Marcus said. I'm sorry. I thought maybe I was misunderstanding the context. I thought, you didn't misunderstand anything, she said. She sat with that for a moment, the full shape of it assembling itself in her mind like a structure rising from its foundation. This was not impulsive. This was not 7 months of a foolish affair and a poorly considered decision to blow it up. This had been planned. This had been engineered. A romantic entanglement that was also simultaneously a professional strategy. Remove her from her marriage, destabilize her professionally, get her out of the way of the work she had built. Take the framework she had spent 3 years developing and quietly reassign its origins to people who had contributed nothing to it. She was not just losing a husband. Someone had been trying to dismantle her entirely, and they had done it so carefully, so patiently, that she had not seen it coming. She picked up her coffee again. Marcus, she said, do you still have access to the Harrington shared drive from the handoff period, the one we used during the transition last fall? He thought about it. My credentials might still work. We were supposed to revoke the access, but the IT ticket got buried. Why? Because I think there are files on that drive that are going to be very interesting, she said. And I think we have a narrow window before someone notices that access still exists and closes it. He looked at her for a long moment. I'm with you, he said simply. She nodded. Outside the office window, the Seattle sky was doing what it did in late October, pulling itself into gray and purple layers, the light going flat, and particular, the kind of afternoon that pressed in close. She had spent a decade in this city. She had built her career in this city. She had brought Daniel here because she loved it, and she had believed for 8 years that she was sharing it with someone who loved it too. Now she sat in her office on the 9th floor with the documentation of her own betrayal spread across 2 monitors, and she felt something settle into place inside her chest, something cold and clear and absolutely certain. She was not going to be a woman who grieved quietly in the corner while other people rewrote the story. She was a cybersecurity specialist. She built walls. She found gaps. She followed trails that other people believed they had erased. They had spent 7 months building a trap designed to destroy her. They had no idea that she had spent 11 years learning exactly how traps worked, and she was only just beginning. The guest room door did not open until 7:43 the next morning. Olivia knew because she had been awake since 5, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop and a legal pad, writing down every single thing she remembered from the past 7 months, with the same methodical focus she brought to penetration testing. Dates, times, conversations that had seemed ordinary when they happened, and now looked completely different under new light. She wrote without stopping, without second-guessing, without allowing herself to feel anything beyond the cold clarity of documentation. She heard Daniel's footsteps in the hallway. She heard him pause outside the kitchen. She heard him breathe once, twice, and then he walked in. I was dressed for work, suit pressed, tie straight. He had shaved. She looked at him and felt something she had not expected. Not anger, not grief, but a kind of profound exhaustion at the performance of it. That he could stand there in a pressed suit after everything, as if the ordinary rituals of a Tuesday morning could paper over what was sitting between them. He said, I didn't pack a bag. She said, I noticed. I'm not leaving my house, Olivia. She closed her laptop. She looked at him directly. You can call it your house when your name is on the mortgage without mine beside it. Until then, you are staying in the guest room or you are staying somewhere else. Those are the 2 options. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down hard. This is not how adults handle this. You're right, she said. Adults don't send photographs. He had the decency to look away. Sophia panicked, he said. She didn't think. Sophia thought very carefully, Olivia said. She chose the photo. She chose the timing. She chose to send it to me directly instead of letting it come out some other way. The only thing Sophia didn't think about was what I would do next. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, What are you going to do next? She picked up her coffee. Go to work. He stared at her. That's it. That's it for today, she said. She stood up, gathered her laptop, and left him sitting at the table she had picked out in the kitchen she had designed in the house that had her signature on every document that made it real. She did not look back. The drive to the office took 22 minutes. She spent the first 10 of them in complete silence. Then she called her sister Claire, who lived in Portland, and who answered on the second ring the way she always did when she had already been worried. "I saw the post," Claire said immediately. "Are you okay? What happened? Where are you?" "Driving to work. Olivia." A sharp exhale. "You cannot be driving to work right now. I should be exactly where I am," Olivia said. "I need you to listen to me for a minute without telling me what I should be feeling." A pause. "Okay." "I need the name of the family law attorney you used when Kevin and you did your prenuptial agreement. The good one. The one you said was aggressive." Silence. "Claire." "Margaret Holloway," Claire said quietly. "She's in Seattle, actually. I'll text you her number right now." "Thank you." "Olivia, how bad is it?" Olivia merged onto the freeway. "It's worse than you're imagining, but I have everything I need. I just need time." "Do you need me to come up there?" "Not yet. I'll call you tonight." She hung up. Her phone buzzed immediately. Claire's text with Margaret Holloway's number followed by a second text that said, "Only I love you. You are the strongest person I know. Do not let them take anything from you." She read it at a red light. She put the phone face down on the passenger seat and drove. By 8:15, she was at her desk. By 8:20, Marcus appeared with coffee and the look of a man who had not slept well. He set the cup down, sat in the chair across from her, and said, "I got into the Harrington shared drive last night." She looked up. "And—" He opened his laptop and turned it to face her. She leaned forward. What she saw on the screen made her go very still. The Harrington shared drive contained a folder labeled Meridian Expansion that she had never seen before. Inside it were documents, dozens of them dated from the past 4 months, strategic frameworks, architecture designs, technical specifications, all of it bearing a project header that listed 2 primary authors, Daniel Brooks, Sophia Reynolds. Her name appeared nowhere. But the work was hers. She could see it in the structure of the arguments, in the particular way certain technical problems had been approached, in the specific language used to describe network vulnerabilities that she had coined herself during a presentation 18 months ago. It was her thinking, her methodology, her framework wearing 2 other people's names, like a coat that had been stolen off her back while she was looking the other way. "They've been rebuilding the Meridian project from scratch," Marcus said quietly, "using your original architecture as the foundation, and they're presenting it to Harrington's board next Friday as original work. Next Friday, 8 days away." "How far along is the board presentation?" she asked. "From what I can see in the communications folder, almost complete." He hesitated. "Olivia, there's something else." She waited. He clicked to a different folder. "There's an internal email chain between Sophia and someone named Greg Harmon. He's a senior partner at Harrington. The chain starts 11 months ago." 11 months, a full month before the affair, according to Daniel's own admission. She felt something cold move through her. "What does it say?" Marcus did not answer immediately. Instead, he turned the laptop slightly so she could read it herself. The email chain was professional in tone and absolutely devastating in content. Sophia had initiated contact with Greg Harmon, a man Olivia had never met, never heard of, never had any reason to think about, to propose a consulting arrangement. She had described herself as having intimate knowledge of the Meridian project's internal development. She had offered to deliver a comprehensive framework based on its core architecture for a contracted fee. She had made that offer before she and Daniel had started their affair, before Olivia had any reason to suspect anything. Sophia had been planning this for 11 months. Olivia sat back in her chair. She thought about 15 years of friendship, birthday dinners, hospital waiting rooms, the time Sophia had driven 4 hours in a snowstorm because Olivia had called her crying after a miscarriage she had never told Daniel about because she hadn't been ready to say it out loud yet. She thought about what it meant that the woman who had held her hand in that hospital room had also been at that very same time building a strategy to take her professional life apart piece by piece. "Are you okay?" Marcus asked. "Forward me everything," she said. "All of it. The folder, the email chain, the document timestamps. Everything on that drive that touches the Meridian name." "Already done," he said. "It's in your inbox." She nodded once. "Good. Now close the drive access and don't touch it again. I don't want anyone to know we've seen it." He closed the laptop. He looked at her with the expression of someone trying to determine how much a person could absorb before something in them gave way. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to let them finish building their presentation," she said. He stared at her. "You're going to let them—" "They're almost done. The closer they get to finished, the more complete the evidence is. If I move now, they pull back, regroup, and reconstruct. If I wait until Friday—" She stopped. Let him finish the thought himself. He sat with it for a moment. "If you wait until Friday, they walk into that boardroom with the whole thing assembled. And I walk in right behind them," she said. I was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "That's either the most brilliant thing I've ever heard, or it's going to break you." "Then let's make sure it's the first one," she said. She pulled her laptop toward her and opened her inbox. "I need you to do something for me. The IT ticket to revoke our Harrington Drive access, find out who submitted it, and when it was supposed to be processed." "That's easy enough. Why?" "Because someone buried it," she said. "And I want to know if that was an accident, or if someone buried it on purpose to keep our access alive. Either way, I want to know whose hands touched that ticket." He nodded. He stood up to go. "Marcus." He turned back. "Thank you for telling me about the parking garage, for last night, for all of it." He looked at her with something that was not quite pity and not quite admiration, but existed somewhere in the complicated space between. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "Just don't let them win." She had already decided that was not an option. The call from Sophia came at 11:17, and this time Olivia answered it. There was a silence on the other end that lasted exactly 2 seconds, long enough to tell Olivia that Sophia had not actually expected her to pick up. "Olivia." Her voice was soft, practiced, the voice she used when she wanted to seem vulnerable. "Thank God. I've been trying to reach you since—" "I know," Olivia said. "I saw. I need to explain. What you saw in that photo, I know how it looked. I know what you must be thinking. But you have to let me explain, because this is not—" "Sophia," Olivia said quietly. "Stop." The soft voice faltered. "What?" "I don't need an explanation. I need you to answer one question." A pause. "Okay." "Was it worth it?" Silence. "I'm asking genuinely," Olivia said. "Not to be cruel. I want to know, was what you've spent the last 11 months building actually worth the cost of what it took to build it?" Another silence. Longer this time. 11 months. Sophia's voice had changed, something careful entering it. "What do you mean, 11 months? I don't know what you think you—" "Greg Harmon," Olivia said. The silence that followed was of a completely different quality than any that had come before it. It was not the silence of someone searching for words. It was the silence of someone who had just understood that the ground they were standing on was not solid. "How do you—" Sophia started. "Because I'm good at my job," Olivia said simply. "The same job you've been trying to take from me. I want you to know something, Sophia. I'm not angry. I want you to really hear that. I'm not angry right now. What I am is finished. And when I'm finished with something, it stays finished. Do you understand what I'm saying?" No answer. "Sophia." "I hear you," Sophia said very quietly. "Good," Olivia said. "Take care of yourself." She hung up. She sat with the phone in her hand for a moment, and she let herself feel it, the specific grief of losing a friendship that she now understood had already been gone long before she knew to mourn it. It was a hollow, echoing kind of pain, different from the pain of Daniel's betrayal, because at least with Daniel she could trace the arc of what had once been real. With Sophia, she was no longer sure when the performance had begun. She was no longer sure which memories were genuine and which had been maintained for strategic reasons. She was not sure that question even had an answer. She set the phone down and went back to work. At 12:45, Patricia called her into a meeting room on the 11th floor. When Olivia walked in, there were 2 people she did not recognize sitting beside her manager, a man in a charcoal suit and a woman with reading glasses and a yellow legal pad. "These are our employment law consultants," Patricia said. "They've been reviewing the documentation you submitted yesterday afternoon regarding the Meridian project." Olivia sat down. The man in the charcoal suit, he introduced himself as Warren. No last name offered, leaned forward and folded his hands on the table. "Ms. Carter, we've had a chance to go through the materials you provided. The timestamp history is comprehensive. The email documentation is clear. The version control logs are, frankly, they're about as clean a chain of authorship as we've seen in a case like this." "This has happened before," Olivia asked. He exchanged a glance with the woman beside him. Attribution disputes are more common than most people realize, particularly in technology sectors where work product moves between teams. He paused. The concern we have, and the reason Patricia wanted us in this conversation today, is that Mr. Brooks's complaint to HR was filed using language that appeared coordinated, specific language that reflected familiarity with our internal grievance processes. He had help writing it, Olivia said. Warren did not confirm or deny this directly. He simply said, "The complaint has been withdrawn. Mr. Brooks contacted HR at 10 this morning and formally retracted every claim he made yesterday." Olivia looked at Patricia. Patricia said, "We were as surprised as you are." Olivia was not entirely surprised. She had told Daniel yesterday morning that she had barely started looking. He had believed her. Whatever he had said to Sophia after their phone call that morning had convinced him that pressing the HR complaint was a liability he could no longer afford. Good, she thought. He was learning even if he was learning too late. "Is there anything we need to do on my end?" she asked. "The complaint is gone," Warren said. "But I want to flag something for you. When complaints are withdrawn this quickly, particularly after being filed with coordinated language, it sometimes indicates that the party filing them is aware of a larger exposure. They're pulling back the small threat because they know that pushing it forward would invite scrutiny they can't survive." He paused. "Is there something larger happening here that we should be aware of?" Olivia thought about the Harrington Drive, about the board presentation 8 days from now, about Sophia sitting on the other end of a phone call 11 minutes ago, realizing that her name in connection with Greg Harmon had already been spoken aloud. "There may be," she said, "but I'm not ready to bring it to you yet. When I am, you'll be the first call I make." He nodded as if this was a perfectly reasonable answer, which told her that he had heard this kind of response before and knew what it meant that the person sitting across from him was not flailing. They were aiming. At 3 in the afternoon, Daniel called her. She let it go to voicemail. His message lasted 48 seconds. She played it at her desk with the volume low, listening to the particular texture of his voice when he was frightened, that slight roughness at the edges, the way his words came slightly faster than normal as if he could outrun his own anxiety. "Olivia, I withdrew the HR complaint. I should not have filed it. I panicked and I made a bad decision and I want to talk, not about the marriage. I understand where you are on that. But there are things happening that I think you need to know about. Things I didn't fully understand when I got involved. I made some decisions that I thought I knew what I was doing. I didn't. And now I think some people may get hurt who don't deserve to be. Please call me back. Please." She played it twice. Then she sat very quietly for a moment, parsing the specific phrasing. "Things I didn't fully understand when I got involved. I thought I knew what I was doing. I didn't." This was not an apology. This was a man who had just realized that the partnership he had entered was not the partnership he had believed it to be. This was a man whose ally had become in his mind something that looked more like exposure. She thought about calling him back. She decided to wait. By 5 o'clock, she had contacted Margaret Holloway's office and secured an appointment for Thursday morning. The assistant who took her call was efficient and asked no unnecessary questions, which Olivia took as a good sign. She sent Margaret's office a preliminary document package by secure email, the post-nuptial financial overview, the mortgage documentation, the investment accounts, the preliminary outline of the Harrington situation insofar as it connected to marital assets. She was thorough. She was specific. She left nothing vague that could be made precise. At 5:45, she was the last one left on her floor, except for the overnight security desk. She walked to the window and looked at the city for a long moment, the lights coming on in the buildings across the street, the slow drift of traffic below the particular quality of an October evening, settling into the glass and steel of a city she had chosen and built a life in. She thought about Sophia's voice on the phone, the 2 seconds of silence before she spoke, the careful, practiced softness, and then the completely different quality of silence after Olivia said the name Greg Harmon. She thought about how long it takes to become someone who could do what Sophia had done, whether it happened gradually, one small compromise at a time, or whether there had always been this other version of her underneath, patient and waiting. She thought about Daniel's voicemail. Things I didn't fully understand when I got involved. What exactly had he not understood? She turned away from the window and sat back down at her desk. She opened the email thread Marcus had forwarded from the Harrington Drive and read the Sophia to Greg Harmon chain from the beginning, again slowly this time, looking not at the big shape of it, but at the small details, the word choices, the specific claims Sophia made about her own access to the Meridian framework, the way she described her relationship with the project's development. And there it was in an email dated 11 months ago, in a line she had glossed over in the morning's shock of recognition. Sophia had written, "I've had access to the design process from the beginning. My colleague's husband has been sharing materials with me for months. By the time she finishes the project, we'll have everything we need to build the expansion independently." Olivia read the line 3 times. My colleague's husband. Not Daniel's wife's project. Not Olivia's work. My colleague's husband. Daniel had been sharing her materials, her drafts, her working notes, her version-controlled design files that she had kept on a shared home server she had set up 2 years ago for convenience, for the ease of moving between her work laptop and home desktop, for the ordinary domestic efficiency of a life that trusted its own walls. Her home server, that she had set up, that Daniel had access to, that she had never thought to protect from him because she had never imagined needing to. She thought about how many nights he had been in the home office after she went to bed, how many mornings she had come downstairs to find him already up and at the desk with a cup of coffee, closing a window on the screen when she walked in saying he was just checking email. He had been copying her files, for months, sending them to Sophia, who had been selling them to Greg Harmon at Harrington. While Olivia built the project that made all of it possible without any idea that her own home, her own server, her own marriage had been the open door through which everything she worked for was walking out. She picked up her phone. She called Marcus. He answered on the first ring. "What did you find?" "Check the home server," she said. "I'm going to give you remote access. I need you to look at the access logs going back 14 months. I need to know every time that server was accessed from a device that wasn't my laptop or my phone." "You think he was pulling files directly?" "I think he had every opportunity and every reason," she said. "And I think if the logs show what I believe they're going to show, we don't just have an attribution dispute. We have theft. Actual documented, legally actionable theft of intellectual property." She heard Marcus exhale slowly. "Olivia, if that's what the logs show—" "I know what it means," she said. "Send me the access request form and I'll authorize your credentials in the next 5 minutes." She hung up. She opened the server management portal. Her hands were steady. Her mind was clear. This was the part that other people did not understand about her, the part that had always confused Daniel, which she could see now with perfect hindsight, because now she understood that he had been watching her and measuring her and feeding information about her to someone who wanted to take what she had built. He had never understood why she was calm in catastrophe. He had probably told Sophia that Olivia was cold, that she was disconnected, that she would not fight back the way a normal person would fight back. He had mistaken stillness for passivity. He had mistaken precision for defeat. She authorized Marcus's credentials. She sent him the server access. She sat at her desk and waited. 17 minutes later, her phone rang. 43 unauthorized access events, Marcus said. His voice was completely flat, the way voices go when the information is too large to carry any additional weight. Starting 14 months ago, stopping 2 months ago. The device fingerprint matches a laptop registered to Daniel Brooks. The files accessed include every draft version of the Meridian architecture from initial concept through final submission. She closed her eyes. "The last access event," Marcus continued, "was the night before you submitted the final Meridian report to the client. Someone went into the server at 2:17 in the morning and downloaded the complete final version. The complete final version, Olivia, before you had submitted it publicly. 2:17 in the morning. She had been asleep. She had been asleep in her own bed in her own house, next to her own husband who had gotten up quietly in the dark and walked to the home office and downloaded the finished work she had spent 3 years building. "Marcus," she said, "I'm here. Screenshot everything. Export every log entry with its full metadata. Do not alter a single line. Save it in 3 separate locations." "Already started." "And then go home," she said. "Get some rest. I need you clear-headed for the next 8 days." A pause. "Are you going home?" She looked at the time on her screen. 7:42. "Soon," she said. She stayed another hour. When she finally walked out of the building and stood on the sidewalk with the cool October air moving past her, she thought about the version of herself that had existed 2 days ago. The woman who had sat at the oak desk making tea go cold, who had trusted the walls of her own life, who had believed that love and loyalty meant the same thing to everyone who claimed to feel them. She did not feel sorry for that woman. She felt something closer to tenderness. That version of herself had worked hard and loved genuinely and built something real from the ground up with her own mind and her own hands. None of that was made less true by what she had just learned. The work was still her work. The achievement was still her achievement. The only thing that had changed was her understanding of who had been watching while she built it, and what they had been planning to do with what they saw. She hailed a cab rather than walking to her car because she did not trust herself to drive with the particular quality of clarity that was moving through her. Right now, the kind that sharpened everything to a fine edge and made the distance between calm and braking feel very thin. In the back of the cab, she finally allowed herself to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly with her face turned toward the window, letting the grief move through her with the same efficiency she brought to everything else. She cried for the marriage she had believed in. She cried for the friendship she had spent 15 years maintaining. She cried for the hours she had spent on that server, on that project, on the careful construction of a professional life that someone had decided they were entitled to take. She cried for exactly 7 minutes. Then she wiped her face. She straightened her jacket. She thought about Friday. 8 days from now, Daniel Brooks and Sophia Reynolds were going to walk into a boardroom at Harrington Technologies and present work they had stolen as the foundation of a new contract. They were going to stand in front of senior partners and describe a framework they had not built using language they had not developed to claim credit they had not earned. And Olivia Carter, cybersecurity specialist, was going to be ready. She had 43 unauthorized access events with full metadata. She had an 11-month email chain between Sophia and Greg Harmon. She had version-controlled design files with timestamps that told the complete story of every document's origin. She had a meeting with Margaret Holloway on Thursday morning. She had Marcus. She had 8 days. The cab pulled up to her building. She paid. She got out. She stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the windows of the apartment she had shared with Daniel for 6 years. The lights still on the way, she had left them that morning, the ordinary illumination of a life that was about to become something completely different. She was not afraid of different. She was in fact counting on it. She went inside. Thursday morning arrived the way all important mornings do, ordinary on the surface, enormous underneath. Olivia was up at 5:15. She had slept 4 hours, which was enough. She had trained herself years ago to function on compressed sleep during high-stakes projects, the kind of projects where missing a detail at hour 30 meant a client's entire network was exposed. This was that kind of project, the most important one she had ever worked. Daniel had spent Wednesday night in the guest room again. She had heard him on the phone twice after midnight, his voice low and controlled the way it got when he was managing something he was afraid of. She had not pressed her ear to the wall. She did not need to. She already knew everything that mattered. She dressed carefully. Dark navy suit, the one she wore when she testified before compliance boards. Low heels, hair pulled back. She looked at herself in the mirror for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to confirm she looked like someone who could not be rattled, and then she picked up her bag and walked out. She was in Margaret Holloway's office by 8 o'clock sharp. Margaret Holloway was 53 small and possessed of the particular stillness that belongs to people who have spent decades in rooms where everything is at stake. She had short silver hair and reading glasses she pushed up onto her forehead when she was thinking hard, and she listened to Olivia speak for 22 uninterrupted minutes without writing a single note, which Olivia found immediately reassuring. The best listeners never needed to write things down right away. When Olivia finished, Margaret said, "You have the server logs. 43 access events, full metadata, device fingerprint matched and documented. You have the Harrington email chain. 11 months, original and forwarded copies saved in 3 separate locations. You have the version control history on the Meridian project. Every draft from the first concept document through final submission. Timestamps intact. My name on every file header." Margaret pushed her glasses up onto her forehead. "And the board presentation at Harrington is this Friday. 6 days from now." Margaret looked at her for a long moment. "Most people in your position would have already gone to their company's legal team, or filed a police report, or confronted the parties directly. Most people in my position were not cybersecurity specialists with 11 years of evidence preservation training," Olivia said. Something moved in Margaret's expression that was not quite a smile, but was adjacent to one. Fair point. She folded her hands on the desk. Here is what I'm going to tell you, and I want you to hear all of it before you respond. What you have is strong. The server log evidence alone, combined with the email chain showing premeditation, creates a very compelling picture of coordinated intellectual property theft. In a civil context, that's significant. In a divorce context, it's potentially decisive for asset division because it demonstrates that marital assets, your professional work product, and its future earning value were deliberately transferred to third parties without your consent. Olivia nodded. However, Margaret continued, the moment you move on the IP theft, you lose the element of surprise on the Harrington presentation. They will know you know. They will pull back. They may be able to obscure the trail in ways that complicate the civil case. I know, Olivia said. So the question is, which matters more to you? Moving quickly on the divorce and the IP claim, or letting them finish walking into the trap they've built? Olivia looked at her steadily. Can I do both? Margaret studied her. Explain. I filed the divorce petition today quietly. Standard process, no press, no drama. That protects the marital asset timeline. But I do not serve Daniel until after Friday. I let the Harrington presentation happen. I let them walk into that boardroom with stolen work. And then the moment they present it, you produce the evidence in a context where it cannot be buried, Margaret said, in front of the senior partners who are about to sign a contract based on fraudulent authorship, Olivia said. In front of people who will have a very strong financial incentive to understand exactly what they almost agreed to. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then she said, that's a risk. If anything goes wrong with the timing. Nothing will go wrong with the timing, Olivia said. I've been managing systems where a single mistake costs a company its entire data infrastructure. I know how to hold a sequence. Another moment of quiet. Then Margaret pushed her glasses back down onto her nose, picked up her pen and said, I'll have the petition drafted by end of day. You'll have it in your secure inbox by 6 tonight. Thank you. One more thing. Margaret looked at her over the glasses. Daniel's voicemail, the one where he said there are things you need to know. Have you called him back? Not yet. Call him back, Margaret said. Today, before Friday, not to reconcile, not to give anything away, but because a man who is beginning to feel that his partner in this scheme is more of a liability than an asset may be the most valuable source of information you have access to. Olivia thought about the specific phrasing of that voicemail. I thought I knew what I was doing. I didn't. And now I think some people may get hurt who don't deserve to be. She thought about who Daniel would consider undeserving of being hurt. She thought about the answer. I'll call him this afternoon, she said. She left Margaret's office at 9:40 and went directly to her own. Marcus was already at her door with his laptop open and the expression of a man who had been awake since before dawn. He said without greeting, I found the IT ticket. She walked past him into her office and sat down. Tell me. He followed her in and sat across from her. The ticket to revoke our Harrington Drive access was submitted by someone in our IT department 8 months ago. Standard process. It should have been processed within 48 hours. He turned the laptop to face her. It was flagged for review and then manually deprioritized by a senior IT administrator named Phil Garrett. She looked at the name. I don't know Phil Garrett. Neither did I until this morning, Marcus said. But I know that Phil Garrett was hired 14 months ago, and I know that his previous employer, the consulting firm he worked at before he came here, shares a managing partner with Harrington Technologies. The room was very quiet. Phil Garrett kept the access open on purpose, Olivia said. I can't prove intent from the ticket alone, but the timing, the connection to Harrington, the fact that the ticket was deprioritized without explanation. He stopped. It's a very specific coincidence. It's not a coincidence, she said. They had someone on the inside here. They didn't just have Daniel feeding them files from the home server. They had an inside contact making sure the back door stayed open. She sat with the shape of it. 11 months of planning, Sophia approaching Harrington, an inside contact at Olivia's own firm, Daniel stealing files from the home server. An affair designed to destabilize her personally, while the professional dismantlement happened around her. This was not opportunism. This was architecture. Somebody had looked at Olivia Carter's life, her career, her marriage, her professional relationships, and had drawn a blueprint for taking it apart, She thought about who had the skill and the motivation to design something like that. She thought about Sophia Reynolds, who had a master's degree in organizational psychology, who had spent 8 years in corporate consulting before moving into the technology sector, who understood systems, not technical systems, but human ones, who to approach, how to incentivize, how to create alignment between parties who had different individual motivations but shared a common obstacle. The obstacle had been Olivia. "I want everything on Phil Garrett," she said. "Employment history, the Harrington connection, every ticket he touched in the past 14 months that involved any project connected to Meridian or to my team. I'll have it by end of day," Marcus said. He hesitated. "Olivia, this is bigger than a divorce and an attribution dispute." "I know. This could be criminal. Coordinated IP theft, potentially corporate espionage, depending on what Phil Garrett's role actually was." "I know," she said again. "I have a meeting with an attorney tomorrow morning to discuss the full scope. But right now, I need you focused on the Garrett documentation. Can you do that?" "Yes," he said. He stood up. Then he stopped. "For what it's worth, I've worked with a lot of people in this building over the past 6 years. I have never once, not for a single moment, seen you take credit for something you didn't earn. Everything they're trying to claim has your fingerprints on it because you built it, all of it. I just want you to know that somebody in this building saw that clearly even when other people were busy not seeing it." She looked at him. She said, "That means more than you know." He nodded once and left. She sat at her desk and breathed for a moment. Then she picked up her phone and called Daniel. He answered before the first ring finished. "Olivia, you said you had things I needed to know," she said. "I'm listening." A pause. She heard him exhale, not relief exactly, but something adjacent. The sound of a man who had been waiting with a weight on his chest and had just felt it shift slightly. "Where are you?" he asked. "At my office. Talk." Can we do this in person tonight?" "No," she said. "Talk now or don't talk. Those are the options." Another pause. She heard him move, heard a door close, and understood that he was putting himself somewhere private. "Okay," he said. "Okay, I need you to understand something first. When this started, when Sophia first came to me, she told me it was a consulting side project, something separate from your work. She said she had an independent framework she was developing, and she needed insight into how certain technical problems were being approached in the current industry landscape. She said she would never use anything directly. She said it was background information, context." Olivia said nothing. "I know how that sounds," he said quickly. "I know. But at that point I hadn't Sophia and it wasn't what it became yet. She was a colleague, she was your friend, and she was very convincing." "She always was," Olivia said. "I shared some notes, early drafts, nothing that felt significant at the time, but then she kept asking for more, and by the time I understood what she was actually doing with it, I was in deep enough that I didn't know how to get out without—" He stopped. "Without exposing yourself," Olivia said. "Yes." She let that sit for a moment. "Daniel, tell me about Greg Harmon." Silence. Long enough that she thought the call might have dropped. "Daniel, Sophia has a financial arrangement with Harmon," he said very quietly. "She's been receiving consulting payments from Harrington for months. I didn't know the full amount until 3 weeks ago. When I found out—" He stopped again. "It's a lot of money, Olivia, more than I understood when I thought this was just a side project. This is a contract worth close to $2 million to Harrington if the expansion framework delivers what Sophia promised." $2 million. She kept her voice completely steady. "And your name is on the Harrington presentation as a co-author." A long pause. "Yes." "Which means you have financial exposure in this." "Yes." "Which is why you withdrew the HR complaint." "Sophia told me to file it," he said, and his voice had gone tight and brittle in a way she recognized from the rare times in their marriage when he had been genuinely frightened. "She said it would create a narrative that positioned you as professionally unstable before everything came out. She said it would help our side. But when I talked to her after your call yesterday, after you said her name to her on the phone, and she called me immediately afterward, she was not the person I thought I knew. She told me to stay quiet. She told me that if I created any problems for the Harrington deal, she would make sure I took the full exposure for everything. She said she had documentation that made it look like the file sharing was entirely my idea." Olivia closed her eyes for a brief moment. There it was, the architecture completing itself in her mind. Sophia had not just planned to take Olivia's work. She had planned from the beginning to make sure that if anything went wrong, there was a clear fall person available. Someone whose fingerprints were literally on the stolen files. Someone who was emotionally compromised by an affair and therefore not in a stable position to mount a credible defense. She had used Daniel the same way she had used Olivia, as a resource to be extracted until there was nothing left worth taking. "Daniel," Olivia said carefully, "I need you to listen to me very precisely right now. Okay. Do not call Sophia again. Do not text her. Do not respond to anything she sends you. Do not go into our home server or touch any device that is ever connected to it. Do not delete anything. Do not move any files. Do not alter anything in any direction." A pause. "Are you Olivia? Are you trying to help me?" "I am trying to preserve evidence," she said. "Whatever happens with us, and I want to be honest with you, I am not telling you that there is a path back from this for our marriage because I do not believe there is. But whatever happens between us personally, you are not the primary target of what I am building. Sophia Reynolds and Greg Harmon are. If you can make yourself useful to the truth rather than to her version of it, that changes your exposure significantly." I was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough in a way that had nothing to do with control. "I am so sorry, Olivia. I know it doesn't fix anything. I know I don't deserve—" "Stop," she said not unkindly. "I don't need that right now. I need you to do exactly what I just told you. Can you do that?" "Yes," he said. "Yes, I can do that." "Good," she paused. "Daniel, the home server. Are there other files on there besides Meridian, other projects, other client work that you may have shared?" A heavy silence. "How much?" she said. "3 other projects," he said. "Early stage, conceptual work. Nothing as developed as Meridian." She absorbed this. "Send me a list. Everything you shared, every date you shared it, every device you sent it from. Tonight. Secure email only." She gave him the address. "And Daniel, be accurate. If I find something that's not on your list, it looks like concealment. Concealment makes everything worse for you." "I understand," he said. She hung up. She sat with the phone in her hand and stared at the middle distance for a moment, and she allowed herself to feel for exactly 30 seconds the full weight of what it meant that her husband had been methodically handing her work to a woman who had been systematically dismantling her life, and that he had done it because a beautiful, calculated, patient woman had made him feel important, and had then waited until he was too entangled to walk away. 30 seconds. Then she opened her email and began drafting the documentation request she would bring to Margaret Holloway's office the next morning. She worked until 7. When she drove home, she found Daniel sitting at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad in front of him covered in his handwriting. He looked up when she came in. He looked hollowed out in a way that was different from the past 2 mornings, not panicked anymore, but something quieter and heavier, like a man who had finally stopped running and was now simply sitting with the thing he had been running from. He pushed the legal pad across the table. "Everything," he said. "Every date, every file, every time. I was as specific as I could be." She picked it up. She read it standing at the table. He watched her without speaking. When she finished, she set it down. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. He started to stand to leave the kitchen to go back to the guest room where he had been spending his nights. "Daniel," she said. He stopped. She looked at him for a moment, really looked the way you can only look at someone when you no longer need them to be anything other than what they are. "When did you know it had gone too far? Not with Sophia, with the files. When did you know that what you were doing was wrong?" I thought about it for a moment. She could see him being honest with himself in real time, which was perhaps the first genuinely honest thing she had watched him do in a long time. "The night before you submitted the final Meridian report," he said. "When I went in and downloaded the complete version, I sat in the office with it on the screen and I thought about how many nights you had worked on it, how many times you had come to bed at 2 in the morning, and I had pretended to be asleep because I didn't want to have a conversation about how much you were doing." He stopped. "I thought about how proud you were going to be when you submitted it, and I went ahead and downloaded it anyway." He looked at the table. "That's when I knew, and I did it anyway." She stood with that for a moment. Then she said, "Go get some sleep." And she walked past him to the home office and closed the door. Friday morning came in 6 days faster than she expected and slower than she could stand. She spent those 6 days in a state of controlled intensity that she later remembered as the clearest she had felt in years. Margaret Holloway filed the divorce petition Thursday afternoon. The Phil Garrett documentation Marcus assembled revealed a consulting relationship with Harrington that predated his hiring at Olivia's firm by 6 months, enough to demonstrate that his placement had not been coincidental. Warren, the employment law consultant, when presented with the full picture on Friday morning, went very quiet for a very long time and then said, "I need to make some calls." Those calls, Olivia understood, were going to the senior partners. She did not know what those conversations contained. She did not need to. She only needed Friday. Saturday came and went. Sunday. Monday. Tuesday, during which Daniel sent her a 17-page typed statement expanding on everything he had told her on the phone, notarized with his signature at the bottom of every page. She read it twice and sent it to Margaret. Wednesday, Sophia called one more time. Olivia did not answer. Sophia left a voicemail that lasted 3 minutes and 40 seconds, and which Olivia saved without listening to in full. She would listen later. Right now, it was evidence, not communication. Thursday evening, the night before the Harrington presentation, Olivia sat at the kitchen table. Daniel was staying at his brother's, now had moved out quietly on Monday with a single suitcase, and she laid everything out in front of her, the way she always did before a major presentation. Not the evidence itself, but her own mental map of it. Every piece, every connection, every sequence. She walked through it the way she had walked through every major project of her career, looking for gaps, looking for anything she might have missed or assumed or taken for granted. She found nothing. The case was complete. She went to bed at 10 and slept for 7 hours, which was the most she had slept since the night before Sophia sent that photo. Friday morning, 6:45 a.m. She dressed in the charcoal blazer she wore when she gave keynote presentations. She ate breakfast, actual breakfast, eggs and toast, the first full meal she had sat down to in 2 weeks. She called Claire, who had called her every single day since Monday, and who answered now with a voice that was trying very hard to be calm. "Today's the day," Claire said. "Today's the day," Olivia confirmed. "Are you ready?" Olivia picked up her keys. "I've been ready for 11 months. I just didn't know it yet." She drove to Harrington Technologies. The building was on the south side of the financial district, 41 floors of glass and steel. She had never been inside it. She knew its blueprints the way she knew everything that mattered thoroughly, because knowledge was the only kind of power that no one could take from you in the dark. She walked through the lobby at 8:53. She had a meeting on the schedule, not under her own name and not on anyone's radar. Who would have thought to check? Margaret Holloway had arranged it through a contact at the firm's board level, a quiet conversation about a matter of significant financial importance to Harrington's upcoming partnership decisions. The kind of meeting that senior partners did not decline. She took the elevator to the 32nd floor. The receptionist showed her to a conference room where 2 of Harrington's 3 senior partners were already waiting. Robert Haynes, 70 and sharp-eyed, who had built the firm over 4 decades and was known for having the patience of a man who understood that most problems solve themselves if you watch them long enough. And Carol Sung, 58, the managing partner who controlled all final contract decisions. Olivia set her bag on the table and opened her laptop. "Ms. Carter," Robert Haynes said, "we understand you have something you believe is relevant to a presentation we're receiving this morning." "I do," she said. "I'll be brief because I believe your time is valuable and the evidence is clear enough that it doesn't require embellishment." She walked them through it in 24 minutes. Server logs, email chain, version control history, Phil Garrett's documented relationship with the firm, Daniel's statement, the timeline of the affair alongside the timeline of the intellectual property transfer, showing that they had not been separate events but parallel tracks of the same operation. She spoke clearly and without emotion, the way she presented to compliance boards and penetration testing clients, the way she had trained herself to deliver information that was too important to be obscured by feeling. When she finished, Carol Sung was looking at her with an expression that Olivia could not immediately read. Robert Haynes said, "The presentation is scheduled to begin at 10 o'clock. "I know," Olivia said. "You're asking us to let it proceed." "For approximately 15 minutes, she said. "Long enough for them to make the claim in front of a room of witnesses, and then I would like the opportunity to respond." A silence passed between the 2 partners. Robert Haynes looked at Carol Sung. Carol Sung looked at Olivia. "You understand," Carol said, "that if what you're showing us is accurate, Harrington was very nearly party to a fraudulent contract worth $2 million. "Yes," Olivia said. I understand that. And you brought this to us rather than going directly to the police or to the press. Because your firm is a victim in this as much as I am, Olivia said. You were being used as a vehicle. I thought you deserved to know that and to decide how to respond to it, rather than having it decided for you. Another silence. Robert Haynes looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, Carol, can you have security standing by outside the presentation room at 10? Carol nodded. She was already reaching for her phone. Olivia closed her laptop. She had 42 minutes. She went to the lobby coffee stand and ordered a black coffee and stood by the window drinking it slowly, while the city moved past outside ordinary and busy, and completely unaware that 41 floors above it, a room was being prepared for a reckoning that had been 8 days in the making and 11 months in the building. At 9:58, she took the elevator back to the 32nd floor. At 10 o'clock exactly, she stood outside the glass-walled conference room and watched through the glass as Daniel and Sophia walked in together. She saw the moment Sophia noticed her. It was not dramatic. There was no gasp, no stumble, no visible crack. Sophia Reynolds was too controlled for that. But her stride broke for exactly one step, one single step, where her body understood what her mind had not yet caught up to. And then she recovered and kept walking, and sat down at the table and opened her laptop, with hands that Olivia could see even through the glass were not entirely steady. Daniel sat down beside her. He looked up and saw Olivia through the glass. His face did something complicated and brief. Then he looked back at the table. Robert Haynes entered the room. Carol Sung, 3 other partners. The room arranged itself around the conference table. Sophia stood to begin the presentation. Olivia watched her pull up the opening slide. The Meridian Expansion Framework. 2 names in the author field, Daniel Brooks, Sophia Reynolds. She heard muffled through the glass Sophia begin to speak. She heard the practiced confidence in her voice, the careful construction of a story about an original framework developed over 14 months through independent research and collaborative development. She let her speak for 11 minutes. Then Robert Haynes looked up from his notes, looked through the glass at Olivia, and nodded once. Olivia opened the conference room door. She walked in. And every head in that room turned toward her. Sophia stopped speaking. The silence in the room was total. It was the silence of a dozen people who had just felt the temperature change without understanding why. Olivia set her laptop bag on the end of the table. She opened it. She connected to the room's display system with a calm efficiency that she felt in her bones, the way she felt all familiar things. She looked at Sophia Reynolds across the length of the conference table. Sophia looked back at her. And for the first time, Olivia saw it, not the practiced softness, not the calculated vulnerability, but the actual face underneath all of it. The face of a woman who had spent 11 months building something very carefully and had just watched it become something else entirely. Olivia said quietly and clearly, I have a few things I'd like to add to this presentation. She pulled up the first slide. The room leaned forward. And Sophia Reynolds, for the first time in 11 months, had absolutely nothing to say. The first slide Olivia pulled up was not a document. It was not a timeline. It was not an email chain or a server log or any piece of the technical evidence she had spent 8 days assembling with the precision of someone who understood that the difference between justice and noise was always in the details. The first slide was a single question, white text on a black background, displayed across the full width of Harrington's 32-inch conference room screen. It read, "Who actually built this?" The room stayed silent. Nobody moved. Olivia could feel the weight of 12 people holding their breath simultaneously, that particular suspended quality of a moment before something breaks. Sophia Reynolds stood at the opposite end of the table with her hands flat on the surface in front of her, and she looked at that slide and she looked at Olivia, and for exactly 4 seconds she appeared to be calculating, running the numbers in real time, assessing what Olivia could possibly have, how much she could actually know, whether there was still a version of this that could be managed. Then Olivia clicked to the second slide. It was the version control history of the Meridian Architecture Project. Every draft, every timestamp, every file name with Olivia's author tag embedded in the metadata. 14 months of documented, unalterable development history arranged in a clean vertical timeline that told a story so straightforward it required no narration. She narrated it anyway because she had learned years ago that evidence without voice was just data, and data without context was easy to dismiss, and she was not going to allow anything in this room to be easy to dismiss. The Meridian Expansion Framework, she said, which was presented to you this morning as original collaborative work by Daniel Brooks and Sophia Reynolds, was developed by me over 14 months beginning in September of 2 years ago. The version control history you are looking at now shows every stage of its development, from initial concept through final architecture to completed submission. My name is embedded in the metadata of every file. My credentials authenticated every upload. My email address received every client communication about this project from its inception. She paused. She let that sit. Carol Sung was leaning forward in her chair. Robert Haynes had put down his pen. The 3 other partners were looking at the screen with expressions that ranged from confusion to something sharper and more alarmed. Olivia clicked to the 3rd slide. The server access logs. 43 entries. Dates times file names device fingerprint matched to Daniel Brooks's work laptop. Beginning 14 months ago, Olivia continued, and continuing through the night before I submitted the final Meridian report to my client. My home server was accessed 43 times by a device registered to Daniel Brooks. The files downloaded during those access events correspond precisely to the materials contained in the Harrington Expansion Framework you were about to contract for this morning. She heard someone at the table inhale sharply. She did not look to see who. She clicked to the 4th slide, the Sophia to Greg Harmon email chain. She had selected 3 specific excerpts, highlighted in yellow enlarged, enough to read clearly from any seat in the room. The first, my colleague's husband has been sharing materials with me for months. By the time she finishes the project, we'll have everything we need to build the expansion independently. The second, dated 4 months later. The architecture is essentially complete. We can begin structuring the Harrington proposal. I recommend we frame this as an independent development to avoid any attribution complications. The third, dated 2 months after that. The personal situation is developing as planned. By the time any professional questions arise, the contract should already be signed. The personal situation is developing as planned. She let those words exist in the room for a long moment without comment. Then she said, "This email chain, which I have provided in full to your senior partners and to my attorney, demonstrates that the transfer of my intellectual property to a third party for commercial gain was not incidental. It was not accidental. It was planned 11 months before today's presentation, and it was coordinated with deliberate attention to timing, including the timing of my personal circumstances." She clicked off the display. She looked at Greg Harmon, who was seated at the far end of the table and who had not, since the moment she walked through the door, looked directly at her. He was a heavy-set man in his mid-50s, with the particular stillness of someone who had spent decades in rooms where significant money changed hands and had learned to reveal nothing while processing everything. She said, "Mr. Harmon, I believe you may want to have a conversation with your own legal team before this meeting continues." He looked at her then. His expression was controlled professional, and somewhere beneath the surface of it, she could see something that was not quite fear, but was its practical equivalent, the recognition of exposure. He said nothing. Robert Haynes said, "I think that's a reasonable suggestion, Greg." Sophia moved. It was not dramatic. She did not stand up, did not raise her voice. She simply placed one hand on the table and said with the practiced steadiness of a woman who had spent her entire career learning how to sound reasonable in unreasonable situations, "I think there's been a significant mischaracterization of the development process here. Daniel and I consulted extensively with Olivia's work as a reference framework, which is standard industry practice. Consultation is not theft." The room looked at her. Olivia looked at her. And then for the first time in 8 days, she felt something move in her chest that was not grief, and was not anger, and was not the cold, focused clarity that had carried her through every hour since Tuesday night. What she felt was something closer to sorrow, because she was looking at a woman she had known for 15 years, and she could hear beneath the professional steadiness of Sophia's voice the specific note of someone who had told a version of a story so many times that they had begun to believe the shape of it, if not the content. And she thought about what it cost a person to become that. What you had to set aside, what you had to quiet in yourself, what old wound or old hunger had to be large enough that you fed it with someone else's life. She said, "Sophia, I'm going to give you an opportunity right now that you did not give me." Sophia went very still. I'm going to tell you what I have, all of it, and then I'm going to give you the choice of how this proceeds, not because you deserve that courtesy, but because I am not interested in destroying you. I am interested in recovering what is mine." She laid it out, every piece, the server logs, the email chain, the Phil Garrett connection, and at that name something shifted in Sophia's posture, a barely perceptible tightening that told Olivia she had not known that particular thread had been found. The Daniel statement notarized detailing every file transfer and every date, Margaret Holloway's name, the divorce petition filed Thursday afternoon. When she finished, the room was silent. Sophia sat down. It was not a dramatic collapse. It was the simple, quiet act of a person whose legs have decided they are no longer interested in holding the weight. She sat down, and she looked at the table in front of her, and she said very quietly, "How long have you known?" "I found the Harrington Drive 8 days ago," Olivia said. "I found the email chain the same day. I found the server logs that evening." Sophia closed her eyes. 8 days, she said almost to herself. "You knew for 8 days and you didn't—" She stopped. "You let us finish the presentation." "I needed you to make the claim in front of witnesses," Olivia said simply. "That's how evidence works." A long silence. Daniel, who had not spoken a single word since Olivia walked into the room, said, "I'm sorry." His voice was rough and low, and directed at no one in particular at the table, at the air, at some version of the situation that existed beyond the specific people in it. "I'm sorry," he said again, as if repetition could do something that sincerity alone could not. Sophia looked at him, and what passed across her face in that moment was something Olivia had not anticipated and would think about for a long time afterward. It was not contempt, and it was not calculation, and it was not the practiced emotional performance Olivia had come to associate with everything Sophia did. It was something raw and unguarded and briefly painfully human, something that looked almost like grief, as if she too had lost something in this room, even if what she had lost was a version of herself she had constructed rather than discovered. It lasted only a moment. Then it was gone, and Sophia Reynolds was professional and controlled again, and she looked at Robert Haynes and said, "I'd like to speak with my attorney." Robert Haynes said, "I think that would be wise." At 10:47, security escorted Sophia and Greg Harmon to separate waiting areas on different floors. Daniel remained in the conference room at Robert Haynes's request. Olivia remained as well seated, now her laptop closed, her hands folded on the table in front of her, with a steadiness that had nothing to do with performance. Carol Sung, who had been quiet through most of Olivia's presentation, with the focused attention of someone taking a deposition, looked across the table at her and said, "Ms. Carter, what do you want?" It was the right question, the only question really. Olivia had thought about it. She had thought about it on the drive home from the office on the night she found the server logs. She had thought about it lying awake at 3 in the morning in a bed that felt very large and very quiet. She had thought about it every time she had been tempted to pick up the phone and do something immediate and satisfying and strategically imprecise. She said, "I want full attribution on the Meridian project and all work derived from it in writing, executed by every party who has benefited from its use. I want the Harrington consulting payments to Sophia Reynolds to be documented and submitted to the relevant legal proceedings. I want Phil Garrett's employment and his connection to this firm investigated and addressed. And I want the contract you were about to sign this morning to not exist." Carol looked at her for a moment. "That's a very restrained list." "I'm not interested in spectacles," Olivia said. "I'm interested in accuracy." Robert Haynes looked at Daniel. "Mr. Brooks, are you prepared to corroborate Ms. Carter's account in full?" Daniel looked at Olivia. She looked back at him without expression, without encouragement, without anything that told him what answer she wanted. She had given him the information he needed to make this decision. What he did with it was his. "Yes," Daniel said. "All of it. Everything she said is accurate." Haynes nodded. He looked at Carol. Something passed between them that had the quality of a decision already made confirmed rather than reached. He said, "We'll need to postpone the board session. Carol, can you handle the communications?" "Already drafting," Carol said, looking at her phone. Robert Haynes stood. He buttoned his jacket. He looked at Olivia with the expression of a man who had seen a great many things over 4 decades of building something significant, and who recognized in this moment the particular quality of someone who had earned the ground they were standing on. "Ms. Carter," he said, "I want you to know that Harrington is grateful for how you chose to handle this. You could have gone to the press. You could have filed suit without warning us. You came here first. You were being used without your knowledge, she said. That's not your fault. No, he said, but you treated it as if it were our problem to help solve. That's not nothing. He extended his hand. She shook it. Then he left, and the room began to empty around her, and she sat alone at the long conference table for a moment, with the quiet that followed the end of something enormous, the way a room feels after a storm has passed through it, charged, altered, settling. Her phone buzzed. Marcus. How did it go? She typed back it went. His response came in 4 seconds. That's either very good or very bad. She smiled. She typed very good. She stood up. She gathered her bag. She walked out of the conference room and to the elevator and down through the lobby and out through the glass doors onto the sidewalk. She stood there for a moment with the October air moving around her. She called Claire. Claire picked up on half a ring. Tell me everything, right now. Do not skip anything. It's done, Olivia said. A sound on the other end that was half laugh, half something else entirely. It's done. What does done mean? What happened? It means they walked in with my work, and I walked in behind them, and by the time I was finished, there was nothing left for them to claim. Oh my God, Claire's voice cracked. Oh my God, Olivia. Don't cry, Olivia said. I'm not crying. I'm crying for both of us then, Claire said, and she was audibly and without apology. I am so proud of you. I have been proud of you every single day of your life, but today, Claire. What? Come up this weekend. I'll make dinner. A watery laugh. I'll be there Saturday morning. Don't you dare clean the house before I get there because I want to see what your actual life looks like. My actual life is very clean, Olivia said. I stress organized the entire apartment on Wednesday night. That is the most you thing I have ever heard. Another laugh, cleaner this time, the kind that comes when the worst is over and the body remembers how relief works. Saturday, I'll bring wine. Bring 2 bottles, Olivia said. She hung up. She put the phone in her bag. She stood on the sidewalk for one more moment, and she looked at the city around her, the particular Friday morning energy of a financial district coming fully awake, people moving with purpose in every direction, the ordinary magnificent machinery of a city that did not know or care what had just happened on the 32nd floor of the building behind her. She was 34 years old. She had built something real with her own mind and her own hands, and she had fought for it when someone tried to take it. She was going to walk out of this with her name on her work and her career intact and her integrity uncompromised. She had also lost a marriage. She had lost a friendship. She had lost the version of her life that she had believed in completely enough to stop questioning it. Those losses were real. She did not minimize them. She had cried for 7 minutes in the back of a cab 8 days ago, and she knew that 7 minutes was only the beginning of the grief's full accounting, that there would be more of it ahead arriving in unexpected moments, the way grief always did. But she had not lost herself. She had not become someone else's story. She had remained through all of it the author of her own. She started walking. The legal proceedings moved quickly, which surprised people who did not know how quickly things could move when the evidence was this clean and the stakes were this clear. Margaret Holloway filed the formal civil complaint regarding intellectual property theft within 72 hours of the Harrington meeting. Greg Harmon's legal team contacted her within 48 hours of that, requesting a settlement conversation. Sophia's attorney followed within 24 hours of Harmon's. Margaret called Olivia on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks after the Harrington meeting. Olivia was at her desk back to full capacity, working on a new project for a Portland-based financial firm that had approached her directly based on the Meridian work. Her Meridian work attributed correctly visible now in the professional landscape the way it had always deserved to be. Sophia's team is offering a full settlement, Margaret said. Attribution on all derived work in perpetuity, restitution of all consulting payments she received from Harrington plus damages, a non-disparagement clause running in both directions, and a formal acknowledgement in writing of the original authorship of the Meridian framework. Olivia set down her coffee. And Greg Harmon. Harrington is separating from Harmon with cause. They're cooperating fully with the IP investigation. They've also incidentally approached me about whether you would be interested in discussing a direct consulting relationship with the firm. She sat with that for a moment. Tell them I'm open to a conversation, she said. And Sophia's settlement, Margaret asked. Do you want to counter or shall I accept it, Olivia said, as offered. A pause. You're sure we could push for... I'm sure, Olivia said. I have everything I need from this. I don't need more. She heard Margaret make a small sound that was not quite approval and not quite relief, but occupied the territory between. I'll have the documents to you by end of week, she said. Thank you, Margaret. Olivia. A pause. For what it's worth, in 30 years of practice, I have seen maybe a dozen cases where someone in your position handled things with this level of precision and restraint. Most people in your situation make at least one decision driven by anger that complicates everything. You didn't make that decision. I wanted the truth more than I wanted to punish anyone, Olivia said. Punishment is loud. The truth just has to be clear. She hung up. She looked at her screen. She looked at the project open in front of her, the new architecture she was building for the Portland firm, the clean lines of a framework she was constructing from the beginning, with her name on every file and her credentials on every document, and her full, unambiguous authorship visible to anyone who cared to look. She thought about Daniel. He had cooperated fully with Margaret with the HR investigation at his firm with the Harrington legal team's requests for documentation. He had lost his position at his company by the end of the second week. Not fired, exactly resigned under the kind of mutual agreement that organizations construct when a departure is necessary and a lawsuit is something neither party wants. She had not felt satisfaction at this. She had not felt grief either. She had felt the particular neutral clarity that comes when a consequence arrives that is proportionate and correct. He had called her once since the Harrington meeting. She had answered. He had said, I hope you know that what you built was always genuinely brilliant. I don't think I ever told you that the way I should have. She had said, I know it was brilliant. I built it. He had said, I know. That's kind of the point. She had said goodbye. He had said goodbye. It was the most honest conversation they had managed in probably 3 years, and it lasted 4 minutes, and when she hung up, she sat very quietly for a moment and allowed herself to feel the sadness of what a marriage becomes when two people stop telling each other the truth about who they are. Then she went back to work. Phil Garrett was terminated from his position at the firm the same week that the IT department's internal investigation confirmed his Harrington connection. He did not contest it. His attorney sent a letter of apology on his behalf that said very little of substance, which was consistent with how Olivia had understood him from the beginning, a person who was useful to other people's plans rather than the architect of his own. The divorce was final 11 weeks after Margaret filed the petition. Washington was a no-fault state, and Daniel did not contest the asset division, which was straightforward and documented, and ultimately less complicated than Olivia had feared, partly because she had good legal representation, and partly because a man who understands the full weight of what he has done is often less interested in fighting over furniture than in managing his own conscience. She kept the apartment. She had always loved it more than he did. On the day the divorce was finalized, Marcus appeared at her office door at 4:30 with a bottle of something expensive and 2 glasses from the break room. "Is this appropriate?" he said, holding up the bottle. "Deeply inappropriate," she said. "Pour it." He sat across from her and poured 2 glasses, and she accepted hers, and they sat in the quiet of her office, with the city doing its late afternoon business outside the window. And she thought about what it meant to arrive somewhere, not at an ending exactly, but at a clearing, a place where you could see in every direction and understand clearly what was behind you and what might be ahead. "What's next?" Marcus said. She looked at her glass. "The Portland firm, the Harrington Consulting Conversation. There's a conference in February where I've been asked to speak about network architecture. I said no last year because—" She stopped. Because she had been trying to be present for a marriage that was already being hollowed out from the inside. "I'm going to say yes this year." "Good," he said. "You should have said yes last year." "I should have done a lot of things last year," she said. "But I didn't know what I didn't know yet." He raised his glass. She raised hers. "To knowing," he said. "To knowing," she said. They drank. Outside the window. Seattle was doing what Seattle did in late November, pulling itself into early dark, the lights coming on in every building around them, the city lit up like something that intended to keep going, to keep being itself, to stay warm and alive through whatever the next season brought. She looked at it, and she felt something she had not felt in a long time, something that was not quite peace and not quite joy, but existed in the particular space where exhaustion meets solid ground. She was here. She was whole. She had held on to the thing that mattered most, not the marriage, not the friendship, not even the work. though the work was real and important and hers in a way that was now documented and protected and impossible to erase. What she had held on to was herself. The specific, particular, irreducible self that had built something from nothing and fought for it with precision and stayed honest when dishonesty would have been easier and chosen truth over spectacle every single time it counted. She finished her glass, she set it down, she opened her laptop, she went back to work. The February conference invitation had been sitting in Olivia's email for 3 months before she finally opened it and typed yes. It was a small thing, a single word. But she sat with her finger over the send button for a full 30 seconds before she pressed it, because she understood in a way she could not have articulated to anyone who had not lived through something that dismantled them, and then watched them rebuild that. Yes was not just an answer to a speaking invitation. It was the first time she had said yes to something purely for herself, in longer than she could accurately remember. Not for Daniel's social calendar, not for Sophia's curated version of their friendship, not for the shape of a life that had looked complete from the outside and been quietly hollowing out from within. For herself, she pressed send. Then she went back to the Portland proposal she was finishing and did not allow herself to make it into a larger moment than it was, because she had learned in the months since November that recovery was not made of large moments. It was made of exactly this small decisions accumulated daily, each one choosing the direction of a person who was still figuring out what it meant to live inside a life that was entirely her own. The conference was in Chicago, mid-February, the kind of cold that required a coat she had not owned since graduate school and had to buy specifically for the trip. She flew in the night before, alone checked into a hotel room that was just hers, ordered room service, and sat in bed with her laptop going through her presentation notes with the quiet focus of someone who had stopped needing noise to fill the spaces in her evenings. She slept well. She woke early. She put on the charcoal blazer and looked at herself in the mirror and thought very simply, "There you are." The conference room held approximately 200 people. She had spoken in front of larger audiences before, but this one felt different, not more intimidating, less, because she was standing there as exactly and only herself, with nothing performed and nothing managed, and nothing being held in careful balance against someone else's needs or fears or plans for her. She spoke for 45 minutes about network architecture and the future of cybersecurity frameworks in financial systems. She was specific and technical and occasionally funny, because she had always been occasionally funny and had spent 8 years in a marriage where that part of her was gently, persistently not quite appreciated. When she finished, the applause was real, not polite, real. Afterward, during the networking hour, a woman named Dr. Sandra Okafor found her at the coffee station. Sandra was 51, a professor at Northwestern, who ran a cybersecurity research lab, and who had, it turned out, been following the Meridian framework since its original publication. "I assigned the Meridian architecture to my graduate seminar last semester," Sandra said. "We spent 3 weeks on it. The approach to layered vulnerability, mapping the specific language you developed for describing threat surface area in non-technical terms. My students called it the clearest framework they had encountered in the literature." Olivia looked at her. "Thank you. That means a great deal." "I didn't know you were the author until the attribution issue became public," Sandra said. "When I found out what had happened, what almost happened, I was furious on your behalf. I want you to know that in the research community, the correct authorship is absolutely understood and documented." Something moved in Olivia's chest. Not the validation. She had stopped needing the validation approximately 6 weeks after the Harrington meeting, when she had understood that the work's quality was independent of who claimed it. What moved her was something quieter. The understanding that her work had been in rooms she had never entered, had been read by people who had never met her, had done something useful in the world entirely on its own merits, long before any of the legal proceedings confirmed what she already knew. "Can I ask you something?" Sandra said. "Of course." "When you walked into that boardroom, when you opened that laptop and pulled up the evidence, were you afraid?" Olivia thought about it honestly, the way she always did when someone asked her a question that deserved a real answer. "No," she said. "I was sad. There's a difference." Sandra looked at her for a moment. Then she said, "I'm starting a research initiative on institutional frameworks for IP protection in the technology sector. I'm looking for a practitioner partner, someone with direct field experience who understands both the technical and human dimensions of how these systems fail." She paused. "I would very much like to talk to you about it." Olivia picked up her coffee. "I'd like that too," she said. She flew home from Chicago on a Sunday evening, feeling something she eventually identified on the cab ride from the airport as lightness. Not happiness exactly, though happiness was increasingly present in her days, arriving in ordinary moments without announcement, the way good things do when you have stopped bracing for the worst. What she felt was lightness, the particular quality of a person who has put down a very heavy thing and is still slightly surprised by how much easier it is to move. She had been putting things down for months. The first thing she put down was the question she had spent weeks asking herself in the dark, whether she should have seen it coming, whether there were signs she had missed through carelessness or naivety, or some failure of attention that a smarter, more vigilant version of herself would not have made. She had turned this question over many times in many insomniac hours and had eventually arrived at an answer she trusted. She had not been careless. She had been trusting. Those were not the same thing. Trust was not a failure of intelligence. Trust was what you gave to people who had spent years building the credibility to receive it. The failure was not hers. The failure belonged to the people who had received her trust and converted it into a resource. She put that question down somewhere around week 6 in the middle of a Thursday afternoon when she was 3 hours into a particularly absorbing problem in the Portland project, and she realized she had not thought about it in 4 days. She noted the absence the way you note the absence of a pain you have grown accustomed to, with surprise, with relief, and with the quiet understanding that the healing had been happening whether she was paying attention to it or not. The second thing she put down was Sophia. This one took longer. It took longer because Sophia was not just a betrayal. Sophia was 15 years. Sophia was the person who had driven 4 hours in a snowstorm. Sophia was the specific laugh she made at the end of a long phone call when the conversation had run its natural course. This particular sound that meant the evening had been good and real and worth the time. Sophia was the person she had called sometimes before Daniel when something important happened. Because that is what a best friend is. That is the specific gravity of it. And losing that, not just the reality of it, which had already been lost for far longer than she knew, but the version she had believed in, required a grief that was different in quality from any other kind. She let herself feel it. That was the thing nobody told you about getting through something. You actually had to feel it, not past it, not around it, not managed and medicated and processed into something safer. You had to feel the actual shape of the actual loss. And the shape of Sophia was 15 years long with specific textures and specific memories attached, and it took time to move through all of it. There was a moment about 10 weeks after the Harrington meeting when she was sitting in her apartment on a Saturday afternoon, and her phone buzzed with a notification that Sophia had posted something on Instagram. She did not look at it. She set the phone face down on the table, and she sat with the pull of it, the old automatic reflex of caring what Sophia thought, of wanting to know, of having built her internal landscape, partly around the question of how this person saw the world. She sat with it for 5 minutes. Then she opened her phone and blocked the account. Not in anger, in something more deliberate than anger, in the understanding that there were people who made you smaller by their presence in your peripheral vision, even when they were far away, and that removing them from that peripheral vision was not cruelty. It was maintenance. It was the reasonable, necessary act of tending to the architecture of your own life. She put Sophia down that afternoon. She felt lighter by evening. March arrived, the Portland project completed 2 weeks ahead of schedule, and the client sent her an email that she printed and kept, which she had never done before with any professional communication, because the specific language of it, the way they described what her work had done for their organization, the specific technical achievements they named, the confidence they expressed in recommending her to their industry peers, felt like something worth having in physical form, something that existed beyond a screen. She pinned it to the wall above the oak desk, not because she needed external confirmation of her own value, but because she had spent months in a situation where her value was being actively contested, actively diminished, actively attributed elsewhere, and it mattered. It was allowed to matter, to have something on the wall that said clearly and specifically, "This is what you built," and it was real and it worked, and the people who benefited from it know your name. Sandra Okafor called on a Wednesday in the middle of March, 2 weeks after they had exchanged a detailed series of emails about the research initiative framework. I want to offer you a formal partnership role, Sandra said, as lead practitioner consultant on the IP protection study. The grant is approved. We have 18 months of funding and 2 grad students and a publication timeline that I think is genuinely achievable. Olivia said, yes. No 30-second pause this time, just yes. Sandra laughed a warm, slightly surprised laugh, as if she had prepared for negotiation and found agreement instead. That's the fastest yes I've gotten on anything this year. I've been practicing, Olivia said. She had been practicing, saying yes to things that were good, saying no to things that were not. The distinction had become cleaner as the months passed because she was no longer managing a complicated internal calculus of other people's expectations and needs and carefully constructed narratives. She was simply deciding based on her own clear understanding of what she valued, what she wanted, and what she had to offer. It turned out that when you stripped away everything that had been placed on you by people who needed you to be a particular thing, what remained was not emptiness. What remained was a person who had very specific skills, very genuine enthusiasms, and a remarkably clear sense of what she was and was not willing to do. She was 40 months from 40, and she had never felt more like herself. April brought the first genuinely warm weekend of the year, and Claire came up from Portland with 2 bottles of wine and the uncomplicated joy of a woman who had watched her sister survive something and come out on the other side recognizably fundamentally herself. They sat on the apartment balcony with their glasses and the city doing its Saturday afternoon business below them, and Claire said, "Tell me about the research initiative." And Olivia talked for 20 minutes about IP frameworks and institutional protection mechanisms and the specific technical problems she was most excited to dig into. And Claire listened with the focused attention of someone who understood perhaps 40% of the technical content and 100% of what it meant to see her sister lit up from the inside while she talked about her work. When Olivia finished, Claire said, "You look different." "Different how?" "Like yourself," Claire said. "Like the version of you I knew before you started. I don't know how to say this without it sounding harsh." "Before I started disappearing," Olivia said. Claire looked at her. "Is that what it felt like?" Olivia thought about it. About the years of adjusting herself, her hours, her ambitions, her social energy, her professional visibility around the gravitational field of a marriage that had been asking her gently and persistently, and without ever stating it directly, to be slightly less, slightly quieter, slightly more manageable. She had not noticed herself disappearing because it had happened gradually, one small accommodation at a time, each one individually reasonable, collectively corrosive. "I think I thought I was being a good partner," she said, "making room, compromising, all the things you're supposed to do." She paused. "But there's a difference between making room and making yourself smaller, and I think I crossed that line a long time ago without realizing it." "And now," Claire said. Olivia looked at the city. "Now I take up the space I actually occupy," she said, "which turns out to be considerably more than I had been using." Claire raised her glass. "To taking up space." "To taking up space," Olivia said. Then the twist that she had not seen coming arrived on a Tuesday in late April, 3 weeks after Claire's visit, in the form of an email from an address she did not recognize with a subject line that read, "I owe you a conversation I should have had a year ago." The sender's name was Greg Harmon. She stared at the subject line for a long moment. She had not spoken to Greg Harmon since the Harrington meeting. His legal team had communicated with Margaret's office. The financial settlement had passed through attorneys. She had never expected to hear from him directly, and she had not thought about him much. He had occupied the role in this story of a man who had been a mechanism rather than an instigator, someone whose ambition had made him useful to Sophia's larger design. She opened the email. It was 3 paragraphs long. The first paragraph acknowledged without euphemism or qualification that he had knowingly entered into an arrangement with Sophia Reynolds that he understood to be ethically questionable from the beginning, and that he had proceeded because the financial opportunity was significant, and because he had told himself that the origin of the framework was ambiguous enough to provide him with what he called, in the email, plausible professional distance. He said in plain language that this had been a lie, he told himself, and that he was not writing to excuse it. The second paragraph described what had happened to him since the Harrington meeting, the separation from the firm, the personal financial consequences of the settlement. The conversation he had with his wife, who had not known who had been as blindsided as Olivia in a different register, and what that conversation had cost him and was still costing him. The third paragraph said, "I don't know if you have any interest in correspondence with me. I would not blame you if the answer is no. But I wanted you to know that the person who sat across from you in that boardroom and said nothing while you laid out what had been done to you is not the person I want to be. I'm not sure that information is useful to you. It was important to me to offer it anyway." She read it twice. She thought about it for 2 days. On Thursday morning, she wrote back. Her reply was 4 sentences. She said she appreciated his honesty. She said she did not need an apology from him to close her own chapter on what had happened, because her chapter had been closed on its own terms. She said she hoped the work he was describing, the work of becoming the person he wanted to be, was genuine, and that it would eventually produce something he could stand behind. She said she wished him well. She sent it. She thought for a moment about what it meant that she could write that email and mean every word of it, that she could wish Greg Harmon well without irony, without performance, without the grinding effort of forced magnanimity, that the anger, which had been real and appropriate and had done its necessary work in the months when she needed it to be precise and functional, had genuinely resolved into something quieter. Not forgiveness exactly, which was a word she had always thought people used too casually, as if it were a single act rather than a long process, but something adjacent, a genuine indifference to their suffering that was different from coldness, an understanding that what happened to them was the natural consequence of what they had chosen, and that it was not her job to manage the weight of that. She had her own weight. She was managing it. She was doing fine. May arrived with warmth and longer evenings and the particular quality of a Pacific Northwest spring that rewarded the months of gray with something that felt almost extravagant. Olivia started running in the mornings, not for discipline, not for a metric, but because she had discovered somewhere in the wreckage of the previous year that she liked the way her mind worked when her body was moving. The thoughts settled. The noise quieted. The day arranged itself into something manageable and clear. She ran along the waterfront most mornings, 3 miles out and 3 miles back, and she let her mind do whatever it needed to do during that hour. Sometimes it worked through technical problems from the research initiative. Sometimes it returned without her permission to specific memories: a Sunday morning, a particular laugh, the way the light had looked in the home office when she was deep in the Meridian work, and happy without knowing she was happy. She let those memories exist. She did not argue with them. She did not require them to be different from what they were. The past had happened. She had lived it. It had made her who she was in ways both terrible and valuable, and she was not interested in quarreling with its terms. What she was interested in was this: the morning, the run, the work waiting on her laptop, the research initiative call with Sandra at 10, the dinner with Marcus on Friday, a thank you she had been rescheduling for months because there was always something more pressing, and which she had finally committed to, because gratitude that stays only in your heart eventually starts to feel like a secret you are keeping from someone who deserved to know. At the 6-month mark, after the Harrington meeting, a date she had not specifically planned to note, but which arrived in her consciousness with a particular clarity. She sat at the oak desk in the home office, the one Daniel had carried from the antique market, with sweat on his forehead and joy on his face, and she opened a new document. She had been asked by the conference organizers in Chicago to submit a written version of her February talk for their annual proceedings journal. She had been putting it off, not from reluctance, but from wanting to do it properly, wanting to find the right way in. She had found it. She typed the title at the top of the page: Meridian A Framework for Understanding Layered Vulnerability in Complex Systems, by Olivia Carter. She stared at those 4 words for a moment. By Olivia Carter. She had written her name on documents thousands of times. She had signed her name on mortgage papers and legal filings and client contracts and compliance reports. She had typed it into email signatures and professional profiles and formal submissions. Her name was not new to her, but she had never looked at it quite the way she looked at it in that moment, as something that had been contested and taken and nearly erased, and that she had gone and gotten back. Not given back. Gotten back. With her own hands and her own mind and her own deliberate, patient, precise refusal to be anyone's casualty. She picked up her coffee. She set it back down. She looked at those 4 words one more time. Then she started writing. She wrote for 3 hours without stopping, And the piece that came out of those 3 hours was the best professional writing she had ever produced, not because the content was more technically sophisticated than her previous work, though it was, but because it was written by someone who understood fully and without reservation what they had built and why it mattered and what it had cost and what it was worth. She submitted it at 2 p.m. The editor's confirmation email arrived at 2:14. Standard language. Thank you for your submission. We look forward to reviewing your contribution. Nothing unusual. Nothing that could have predicted what came next. What came next was a week later when the editor called her, directly called, not emailed, to say that the submission had been circulated among the journal's advisory board and that they were requesting her permission to lead the issue with it, to run it as the feature piece with an expanded author profile, and to ask whether she would be willing to participate in a recorded conversation about the framework that they were considering producing as a companion piece for their digital platform. She said yes, she was still practicing. Marcus, when she told him over dinner on Friday, set down his fork and stared at her for a long moment. He said, "The journal that published the Keeler framework, that journal, the one that's been running since 1987 and has—" "Yes," she said, "that one." He picked up his fork again. He shook his head slowly. "I'm going to need a minute." "Take your time," she said, and she was smiling genuinely and fully, and without any of the careful management she had once applied even to her own joy. He raised his glass. She raised hers. "I want to say something," he said, "and I want you to hear it without deflecting because I know you." She waited. "When I heard you on the phone that first morning, the morning after the Instagram post, I thought you were in shock. I thought the calm was the calm of someone who hadn't fully understood yet what had happened." He looked at her steadily. "I was wrong. You understood everything. You just understood it differently than other people would have. And I want to say for the record that watching how you handled every single piece of this, not just the professional parts, but all of it, has been one of the most instructive things I have witnessed in my entire career. Not because it was strategic, because it was true. Because every decision you made came from knowing who you were and refusing to become something else." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You're the reason any of it worked. The drive access, the Garrett documentation, all of it. I didn't do this alone." "No," he said, "but you knew what to do with what I found. That part was yours." She thought about that. She thought about all the parts that had been hers, the precision, the patience, the willingness to wait when every instinct said, move, the ability to hold the shape of an 8-day plan with the same focus she brought to a 14-month project. All of it trained in her over years of work that she had loved because she was genuinely constitutionally good at it, work that had required her to understand how systems failed so that she could help them hold. She had turned that skill on her own life. She had found every vulnerability. She had built the wall back stronger. The journal issue came out in June. Her name was on the cover. Not the name of the issue, the byline of the feature piece printed in the clean serif font. The journal used for author attribution, visible to anyone who opened to the first page, by Olivia Carter. She ordered 3 physical copies. She kept one on the desk. She sent one to Claire, who called her immediately upon receiving it, and cried in a way that was not sad at all, that was purely the overflow of a person who had been holding their breath for 9 months and had finally completely exhaled. She sent the 3rd copy to Margaret Holloway's office with a handwritten note that said, "Because of the work you did, this exists in the world under the right name. Thank you." Margaret sent back a single line, "It was always going to be under the right name. We just made sure of it." On the last evening of June, Olivia sat in her apartment with the windows open and the city warm and busy below, and the journal copy on the desk in front of her, and she thought about a Tuesday evening 8 months ago when her phone had lit up with a photo she had not expected sent by a person she had trusted, and how the world had split cleanly in two in that moment. She thought about what she had learned in the months between that moment and this one. She had learned that the people who love you genuinely do not need you to be smaller, to feel larger themselves. She had learned that trust is a gift you give, not a debt you owe, and that when someone misuses it, the failure is theirs, not yours. She had learned that patience is not the same thing as passivity, and that precision is not the same thing as coldness, and that a woman who moves carefully through a situation that would break most people is not broken, she is building. She had learned that the work you do with your own hands, in your own name, with your own mind, belongs to you in a way that nothing else does, and that this is both a comfort and a responsibility. She had learned, most importantly, that losing the life you thought you had is not the same as losing yourself. That there is a version of you that exists underneath every role you play, wife, friend, colleague, betrayed woman, cautionary tale, that none of those roles can reach. That this version is the one worth protecting. That this version is the one that does the actual building, the actual recovering, the actual choosing. She had chosen every day to protect that version. And sitting in her apartment on the last evening of June with her name on a journal cover and her work in the world and her life arranged around exactly and only the things she had chosen for herself, she understood something she had not been able to articulate in the acute months of the previous year. The photo Sophia sent had not been the beginning of Olivia's destruction. It had been the moment Olivia stopped being destroyed slowly, without knowing it, by something she could not see. It had been the moment she woke up. And waking up even when it hurts, even when the alarm is a photograph on a Tuesday evening, and the thing you are waking from is 8 years of a life you genuinely believed in, waking up is always, always, always worth it. She closed the journal. She opened her laptop. She went back to work. She was exactly who she had always been, standing on ground that finally, completely, and irrevocably belonged to her.